Hello folks, welcome to the car news for August 2024. In this one, we've got plenty coming up from Auto Trader, I think one or two from WhatCar possibly, and from AutoCar. So let's get cracking straight away. Please give the video a thumbs up, it only takes a sec. Are cyclists safe on UK roads? Half of drivers unaware of laws to protect vulnerable road users. Research shows that 42% haven't heard of the hierarchy of responsibility. 12% think it's not true. If you don't know, a couple of years ago, they changed the highway code to give basically car drivers more responsibility for cyclists. So you now have to give cyclists more room, etc. Buses and lorries have even more responsibility over cyclists than cars do. And cyclists now have more responsibility for horses. So it's all a bit odd, but certainly worth refreshing your memory banks if you haven't seen this. There are now obviously more cycle lanes around, so hopefully that helps them out a little bit. I have to say though, there's loads of cycling goes on around my area, and I regularly see cyclists doing ridiculous things. Likewise, I see a lot of idiots in cars way too close to cyclists. So just have a little bit of thought for everyone else on the road, and hopefully things will be better. Peugeot 508 departs, taking the Peugeot sport engineered sub-brand with it. The 508 will be Peugeot's last internal combustion engine saloon. I think it's a great shame. So I really like the 508. I think it's a really good looking car, an interesting car, and came at a time when sort of the Peugeot saloons had been a little bit dull for a little bit of a while. Peugeot saying we've chosen to focus even further on electric models in the UK, with the ZEV mandate giving us a clear direction to do this. Peugeot will continue to sell the 508 and 508SW estate until the end of the year, but only in plug-in hybrid GT trim. MOT testers passed 2.9 million unroadworthy cars. Research reveals there could be 2.9 million unroadworthy and potentially dangerous cars being driven on the UK's roads. That's nuts. More than 1 in 10 cars that passed their MOT last year should have failed because garages failed to uphold government testing standards, a WhatCar investigation has revealed. There are 26.7 million cars on the road that need an MOT, so that's cars over 3 years old. Means that potentially 2.9 million of them could be driven on the UK roads with potentially dangerous defects. As part of its 2023 to 2024 MOT compliance survey, a team of DVSA expert examiners randomly retested a sample of 1,487 used vehicles at sites where the garages were originally assessed. The aim of these annual inspections is to establish if the correct test standards are being applied, but the DVSA examiners disagreed with the MOT test outcomes in 13.7% of instances, saying that 3% of the cars that failed were actually worthy of a pass, so the garage was being overly harsh, and 11% of the cars that actually passed their tests should have failed. Now let's have a look at the different things that they actually got wrong, because as I said, not all of these should have been failures. Some of them should have been passed, and they were actually failed. So the most common areas were on tyres, 731 cases on tyres. That's such a fundamental part of your car. It's the only part of it that's actually touching the road, and your tyres need to be absolutely bob on. I'm sure there are lots of MOT testers that fail tyres that are not quite there yet, but likewise, if tyres that are not safe are getting passed, that's incredibly dangerous. Brakes, 678. So I would say the two most serious things on your car that need to be right are the two most common things to be kind of misdiagnosed, if you like. Suspension, 629. Lights, reflectors and electrics, 392. Non-component advisories, visibility, noise, emissions and leaks, body, chassis and structure. Again, that's an important one. If the car's falling to bits, you need to know about that. Steering, 59%, vehicle identification, 50, seatbelts, 40, and wheels, 25. What do you think of that? Are you shocked by that in any way? I'm actually shocked that there aren't more cases where cars that should be passed are getting failed just to get sort of MOT work, particularly at some of these places that advertise dirt cheap MOTs, to then just basically find something that's wrong with your car that needs to be fixed. The fact that so many cars are getting passed that shouldn't be suggests possibly that corners are being cut, or that the level of training is perhaps not good enough. Low emission zone scheme makes more from PCN fines than daily charges. New research has found that an average of 55% of revenue generated by clean air zones comes from fines. That's an absolute scandal. We're not just talking about London with this either. A Freedom of Information request by Wessex Fleet, a fleet management company based in Wiltshire, found that on average across the UK, more than half, 55% of revenue generated by clean air zones, low emission zones and ultra low emission zones come from penalty charge notices. In 2023, almost £1 billion was raked in across the UK's 15 LEZs. Oxford is the location that relies on offenders the most, with 69% of its low emission zone revenue coming from PCNs, roughly accounting for £64,000 a month. Birmingham issues 55,500 fines per month from this, accounting for 67% of the roughly £2.5 million a year the council garners from the clean air zone. While 𝘼𝙁 in London is not as reliant on fine income, although it issues 97,000 fines a month. That only generates £4 million in revenue, which is 32% of the overall income that the controversial scheme generates. London's 𝘼𝙁 zone is said to be costing drivers as much as £12.5 million a month, or £150 million a year. Now, opposition to 𝘼𝙁 has basically said they're trying to turn as many roads as possible into toll roads, whilst London City Hall recent report says that the 𝘼𝙁 expansion has made a positive impact on air quality. That's a little bit woolly, so we'll have to wait and see on that, won't we? Did Labour lie? Fuel duty expected to rise in October, resulting in perma-high petrol prices. Firstly, I can't believe any politician would ever lie. I think to be a politician, don't you have to be a person of fine, upstanding nature and have a good moral and ethical code? Someone quoted to me recently a brilliant Billy Connolly quote, which was that the people that want to be politicians are by nature the very worst people we could possibly have as politicians. And I think that's a stroke of genius, to be honest. Despite Labour's promise not to raise taxes for working people, the government has told AutoExpress that difficult decisions could be made regarding fuel duty later this year, pushing up the price of petrol and diesel for millions of motorists. AutoExpress got a quote here from a spokesperson for HM Treasury who told them, following the spending audit, the Chancellor has been clear that difficult decisions lie ahead on spending, welfare and tax to fix the foundations of our economy and address the £22 billion hole in public finances left by the last government. That's it, blame the old lot. Decisions on how to do that will be taken at the budget in the round. This is sobering news, with the AA regarding the 5p cut as the only bit of good news in a bleak 3 years of perma-high pump prices. So there we go. What a massive surprise. A politician goes back on their word, or a group of politicians go back on their word. As a reminder, I'm not party political. I hate them all. First pictures of new Tesla Model Y facelift surface online. Images of so-called Juniper facelift have been leaked online, giving a first glimpse of the updated electric SUV. Elon Musk said earlier this year that there's not going to be a facelifted Model Y this year. But it's certainly well in development, and it certainly seems to be in production. So perhaps either Elon's told us a little porky pie, or we're going to be seeing it early next year. Now, there is a Tesla call coming in October. I'm sure it's going to be announced at that, and I'm sure it will be on sale early next year, or perhaps even the order books open this year. If you want to have a look at those leaked pictures, they are too, and they're not very good. So this is the back end, and as you can see, it's got like a big light bar across the back with Tesla embossed in it. And then there's one of the interior which shows some ambient lighting, which we already had in the new Model 3. So no major surprises in those leaked images, but it does show that this new Model Y is a thing. New Chevrolet Corvette ZR1 or ZR1 features America's most powerful V8. The fastest, most powerful Corvette ever uses a twin-turbo flat-plane crank V8 engine with over 1,000 horsepower. Now, I've got 2 electric cars, and I want one of these with every fibre and sinew in my body. I think this is gorgeous. I always love Corvettes. I'd have a Corvette over any Lamborghini. I just think they're epic. I mean, what a thing. I mean, it's absolutely a track car all day long, but I'm glad to still see the odd bonkers car being made. UK electric car charging rollout gathers pace, but regional inequality persists. New figures show an annual increase in the EV charging network by 47%, but UK regions lag far behind London. Yeah, so this is a thing. So typically the southwest has been terribly underserved, and some areas of the north have been terribly underserved. And that seems to be continuing. Where I am and where I tend to go for most of my sort of longer journeys, the EV network's pretty good. I am going up to Norfolk in October, my old stomping ground where I grew up. And I did have a look at ZapMap in Norfolk, and it's not great for fast chargers. And I know there are still sort of black spots in the UK that are just really sort of woefully underserved. So that needs to be addressed. What I would imagine is at the absolute root of this are local councils not giving planning permission. And that happens a lot. There's so much infrastructure currently sort of where companies are willing to invest, they're willing to put the money in, and council planning departments simply won't let it go through for whatever reason that may be. So there's loads of this sort of ready to go that's just sitting on some councillor's desk somewhere. So I think the government needs to get behind this at sort of national level and take it away from the local paper pushers and get things moving. Government says no to A303 tunnel and A27 bypass road projects. Cost savings are blamed as Labour overturns controversial Stonehenge tunnel and Arundel bypass plans. I won't go into that because it's fairly self-explanatory. Drivers pay 1.6 billion extra for fuel as retailers maintain outrageous profit margins. And that's, of course, before the government decides to take away that 5p cut on fuel duty. So we could be seeing even worse to come. In 2019, the average profit margin on a litre of fuel was 4.4p, and it leapt to a high of 8.1% in January 2023. And a lot of this was led by supermarkets who have traditionally always undercut the major retailers, and they just basically stopped. They actually say that supermarket fuel stations overcharged customers by as much as 900 million in 2022. That's crazy, folks. Absolutely crazy. Again, it needs national government control. They need to cap the amount of margin that retailers can put on a litre of fuel. Sports seat manufacturer Ricaro files for bankruptcy. Employees were reportedly unaware of the move, which comes 4 years after the firm was sold to private investors. Now, Ricaro, obviously famous for making those sports bucket seats. They also supply major brands like BMW, Ford, VW, etc. I think there's some really complex sort of ownership structure with Ricaro, though. I think this is the manufacturer, but I think someone else actually owns the license to the brand. I seem to remember when this buyout happened 4 years ago, there was some really weird sort of complex structure. Perhaps not complex, maybe quite simple, but certainly weird. So it might not be the last we see of Ricaro, but maybe it's just the manufacturer of Ricaro has gone. Whatever, it's a brand with huge sort of pedigree, and it's really well known, so I can't see that's really the end of it. BYD Seal facelift brings 800-volt electricals and tech overhaul. The Tesla Model 3 rival gets major update just months after it arrived in the UK. Now, 800-volt architecture we see in a lot of Hyundai Group vehicles, so in some Kias, in Genesis, and it means that you can charge the car really quickly, and actually the charge curve in those cars is astounding as well. Currently, the Seal can do 10 to 80% charging in 37 minutes. That will reduce to 25 minutes, which obviously is going to make it a lot easier to deal with on long journeys, certainly more convenient. Interestingly, on this facelift, they're actually going to use smaller batteries, so you're going to have a bit less range in the car, which is the exact sort of opposite of the current trend, which is when you do a facelift, you give the car a bit more range. BYD haven't said the reason for this, but I'm guessing they feel like they need to cut the price rather than potentially the range being an issue. I think anything over 300 miles nowadays is perfectly fine. And if it's capable of really fast charging, then again, it shouldn't really be an issue for most people. So it looks like they're going to get about 9% range reduction, but you're still well over 300 miles on even the smallest battery. Obviously, a lot of the BYD stuff carries a bit of a premium here because of all the various tariffs and import duties, VAT, etc. before it gets to us. So it would be good to see them competing a bit better than they currently do on price. And I say that with knowledge of what the cars are going for in China, which is an absolute fraction of what we're asked to pay for them. Lack of fleet incentives risk stalling EV sales growth. Policy change should focus on strategic support and not phase out deadlines for ICE vehicles, say fleet experts. At the moment, current benefit in kind levels are only sort of guaranteed until 2028. And that's the point when a lot of people are expecting the government to sort of step on the gas and start really charging people a lot of company car tax on electric cars, just when lots of people have got into them, because that's sort of how things generally work. According to the BVRLA, there's much stronger EV uptake on company car and salary sacrifice schemes than in the general new car market. In the new car market, it's roughly 17% share of all new cars being registered. But on company car schemes, it's 44% of the cars. And on salary sacrifice schemes, it's 84% of the cars are full battery electric. And then, of course, all these cars come into the used market. There aren't enough buyers of used EVs at the moment, largely because so much of the false information that's out there, in my personal opinion. And they're saying here, to tackle EV demand imbalance, Labour needs to introduce a consumer communications campaign to extend the ZEV mandate share of mobility credits to daily rental operators. Currently, EVs are counted 1.5 times towards mandatory sales targets if they're registered to a car club, yet rental fleets don't qualify because, according to the government, they don't offer the same proven reduction in congestion and emissions. So car clubs are these things where basically a Boris bike of a car. Leasing and rental companies have already taken financial risk on a huge portion of the million-plus EVs on our roads, plus they face unsustainable losses from rapid and relentless EV depreciation. Introducing a used vehicle grant or tax incentive would boost demand for used EVs, stabilise the market and give these companies confidence to carry on funding the transition. Because at the moment, they're saying that leasing companies and salary sacrifice companies are taking all this on the chin. They're buying the cars new, putting them out for public use, and then they get the car back after 3 years at the end of the lease or at the end of the salary sacrifice under the company car scheme, whatever. And they're left with a car that's worth far less than they thought it would be. So what they'll have to do in future is obviously put all the prices up on those leases, on those salary sacrifice schemes, and then people won't take them on at that point probably because they'll be too expensive again. So this is a bit of a catch-22 situation here, and they're saying the only way around it is for the government to offer some kind of prop up for when these cars come back as used. I've always thought that it would be a great idea for the government to incentivise getting a home charger installed, because once it's done, possibly you're more likely to get an electric car if you've got an electric car charger on your wall at home. And secondly, when you sell your property, it's already got one. You've added a bit of value to your property, or you've made your property more saleable. And it may be that the next person that moves into your property thinks, oh, it's got an electric car charger. It would be easy for us to get one now. I'm a big believer in making things easier for people, more convenient for people. And sometimes that's a bigger driver than just giving them some money off something. But who knows? I certainly don't, do I? Let's move on. JLR spending $3 billion to hedge against slowing EV uptake. Investment in flexible platforms upped as ICE cars set to stay on sale longer than expected. So they announced originally that they were going to invest $15 billion in new EV platforms. They've now said the hike to $18 billion is partly because we're having to invest more in keeping parallel running of battery electric vehicles and ICE vehicles going for longer than anticipated, as the industry trend towards battery electric vehicles globally starts to slow down from previous expectations. Fiat to integrate charging cables into electric cars, starting with the Grande Panda. A 7.4 kilowatt slow charger will be integrated into each Fiat's fascia. That seems like a good idea at face value, like you've always got a cable there and you don't have the inconvenience of trying to get it out from underneath your shopping or anything like that. But what happens when that cable fails and you have to get that replaced? I hope they factored that into things, because at some point that cable will die and you'll need to replace it. And hopefully they'll make that a simple, painless process and possibly something you can do yourself. How electric cars could prevent blackouts for good. A new trial could outline the benefits of using EV business fleets to power local grids at peak times. So this is vehicle-to-grid technology they're talking about, and how it could be used in especially places like rural areas. If businesses have got big fleets of electric vehicles, let's say, for example, you are a plumbing business and you've got 10 electric vans that are in your yard overnight, every night. If they're all plugged into the grid and the power goes down locally, power could then be harvested from those vans and hopefully put back into them, ready for the morning once everything switches on again. All this vehicle to grid stuff has controls with it, so I believe. So you could say, well, I never want this to be under this state of charge. So you're never going to go to the van in the morning and it's at 0% because, you know, Ethel's put her kettle on next door. But it does seem like a fantastic idea, especially as we've got so many areas where blackouts are still commonplace. Uber partners with BYD to offer drivers discount EVs. The ride-handling provider incentivises employees to go electric as it nears the 2025 deadline for EV-only fleet in London. BYD plans to offer 100,000 cars to Uber over multiple years in markets, starting this year in Europe and Latin America and following with Middle East, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. A joint statement issued by the two firms noted that drivers flagged the purchase price of EVs as well as the availability of finance deals as the biggest barriers to making the switch. They also said they may consider discounting charging, maintenance and insurance to further incentivise employees. Folks, less than a third of you watching this video are subscribed to the channel. It's completely free. It massively helps me out, so please click the subscribe button. Please leave the video a thumbs up as well. All that engagement feeds the algorithm and it helps me a great deal. Thanks ever so much for watching. See you on the next one.